Good morning, afternoon, good evening to all of those of you who have registered from locations across the world for this wonderful series, this inaugural series on the life and teachings of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. And it's an unbelievable privilege for us at World Mizrahi, together with HaChevra Lecheker HaMikra, Yisrael Kristal, and all the members of the board, to present together this series of teachings of Rabbi Sacks by leading scholars, women and men from across the Jewish world on his teachings. And in fact, in recent years, as Rabbi Sacks's words have been, many of his books and talks have been translated into Hebrew, the Hebrew-speaking world in Israel has revealed Rabbi Sacks. In my own community, I often quote him, and people come to me and say they've discovered the world of Rabbi Sacks that the English-speaking world has known for so long. The Hebrew-speaking world has discovered in recent years. And our friends at the Chevra Lecheker HaMikra initiated a program over the last year of top Hebrew scholars talking in Hebrew, and a tremendous success in Israel. And therefore it was most appropriate, the World Mizrahi movement, with our branches and affiliates all around the world, together with HaChevra Lecheker HaMikra, together, and Yisrael Kristal, to present the series in English in the English-speaking world. And we are absolutely privileged that to launch this series is Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman, the president of Yeshiva University, both in his personal and organizational capacity, is such an appropriate candidate and institution indeed to launch the series. And just before I introduce Rabbi Ari, who's going to be giving the inaugural talk in front of the Grus Kollel, the Yeshiva University campus in Israel, and to all of the many hundreds, almost 500 people who have registered worldwide. I just want to read something that we wrote recently in our HaMizrahi magazine. We dedicated our monthly HaMizrahi magazine a few months ago to the first yahrzeit of Rabbi Sacks and to the teachings of Rabbi Sacks, who, as we know, played such a deep role, not only in world Jewry, but humanity, and also very much affiliated to us, the Mizrahi movement. We wrote about the embodiment of sacred and secular values together. And we wrote that Rabbi Sacks embodied this life of integration. He was always bridging and blending godliness and morality, science and religion, halakha and humanism, philosophy and ethics, laws and life, unity and diversity, covenant and conversation, and always playing his part, more than most, arguably more than all, to heal the fractured world. And hence the series, playing the words of Rabbi Sacks, to heal a fractured world, is entitled indeed that, to bring healing, to bring insight, to bring inspiration, based on the teachings of Rabbi Sacks, to people all around the world. And we are absolutely privileged that Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman, the president of Yeshiva University, will be giving this inaugural talk. Indeed, it is Yeshiva University, which its very motto is Torah Umada, Torah and science, Torah in the modern world, Torah and modern sciences, which for so long has been dedicated to these principles, and recently have publicized that they have inaugurated a new center, the Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks Center of Values and Leadership at Yeshiva University, to be headed by Dr. Erika Brown, who herself will also be speaking, and therefore are also endowing and will on an ongoing basis be teaching the values of Rabbi Sacks. And therefore, Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman, it is an honor and privilege for us and the Chevra Lecheker HaMikra to have you and Yeshiva University starting this inaugural series and talking to the leaders of tomorrow, studying at the Grus Kollel. And indeed, the topic of your talk, educating the leaders of tomorrow, something that Rabbi Sacks's personality and writings have and are playing an ongoing example and source of inspiration to the leaders of tomorrow. In fact, at our World Mizrahi, we just had our Shabbaton. We have 5 different leadership programs, and all these programs this last Shabbat got together with all the COVID protocols and had 150 couples together, our leadership programs, all committed to being leaders of tomorrow. And again, Yeshiva University of Ari, for educating the leaders of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Thank you for joining us, Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman. Thank you to you and Yeshiva University for this partnership and all you're doing in the Jewish world. Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman for the inaugural talk on this series. Thank you. Berman for the inaugural talk on this series. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Peretz, Rav Doron, my dear friend. I have to say I have long been deeply impressed with Rav Doron and what he's been able to achieve and accomplish for World Mizrahi. It's incredible what he's done to help spread our movement, our hashkafa, our values, and we are deeply thankful and grateful for his incredible devoted leadership and work, and personally, I am for his friendship. It's my pleasure to join in this series in this inaugural lecture, co-sponsored by Mizrahi and the Chevra Cheker HaMikra. To my dear friend, Rabbi Reuven Tarragon, whose great work in Mizrahi has helped spread all of our teachings of our great rabbis and our hashkafa. To everyone here who's joining us from far and wide at this inaugural lecture, to the students of the Grus Kollel. It's always nice to be with our students, to be here in Yerushalayim with you. I want to especially mention, of course, Lady Elaine and the Sacks family, who are dear friends and partners with us at Yeshiva University in perpetuating the legacy of Rabbi Sacks. As Rav Doron just mentioned, we have recently launched, just this past month, we've recently launched the Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks Center for Values and Leadership, founded by our dear friends Terry and Andrew Herenstein and directed by Dr. Erica Brown. And we're working together to perpetuate the teachings and values of Rabbi Sacks. We all miss him deeply, but none, of course, more than the family he cherished and loved so much. This series, the concept of this series, both highlights the significant void that is felt by Rabbi Sacks's absence, as during these times of turmoil and global crises, we would naturally look to him to provide the moral framework for clarity for how we should proceed further. At the same time, it provides some comfort knowing that in his voluminous writings, teachings, and personal example, there is so much that we can glean that continues to nourish us and ensure that his legacy continues to flourish. Today, what I'd like to address, educating the leaders of tomorrow, is the concept of leadership. A topic very central to Rabbi Sacks's thinking. It's at the heart of Yeshiva University, educating the leaders of tomorrow, and particularly focus on the mindset that's required of leaders in considering major decisions for their own lives and the life of our community. For leadership, I would argue, is not just assuming a position. It's assuming a certain mindset which informs all of life's decisions. So let's take a step back for a second. Start off with some of life's decisions. What are some of life's major decisions? What would you say? Some of life's major decisions? Who are you going to marry? I love that that was the first one. Who you're going to marry, life's major decisions, your choice of a spouse fundamentally orients your life. Who are you going to marry? What else? Say again? Okay, your religious, if you're going to be firm or not, right? The whole religious context of your life. What other major decisions? Career, jobs, right? You spend a lot of time in your life, many hours of your life is going to be filled in the workforce, right? Where are you going to choose? What are you going to do? Where are you going to live? What community are you going to live? Where geography of it? Major. Who your role models will be. Wow. Which sort of like gathers all of these questions. Like who your role model is going to be. Okay, let's get back to that. So, these are life's major decisions. And I'll tell you what I found today, especially because of the disruption of COVID, that a lot of people are thinking and rethinking their life's decisions. The disruption of COVID has caused a certain amount of introspection and reflection. Thinking where people are in their own lives. Is this where they want to stay? A lot of people, if you look, there's an increase in aliyah. whole shift in job, the great resignation that's taking place all in countries around the world. People are shifting their priorities and their jobs. Right? There's a moment of global reflection of where we want to be. And I wanted to focus this question on thinking about using the thought of Rabbi Sacks to understand fundamentally, how do we make these life decisions, the biggest decisions that we make, which translate in how we lead our community to make these kinds of decisions. So what I'd like to suggest, to start with undoubtedly the biggest decision in history, is the decision of the acceptance of God's revelation at Har Sinai. And what's very interesting, we just read it in this week's Parsha, just read yesterday, Kabbalat Torah, the acceptance of the Torah. While, of course, the Torah Shabbatab only speaks about Hashem giving the Torah to Am Yisrael, the Midrash in the famous Midrashic literature suggests that Hashem actually first proposed the very same question to all of the nations of the world. So, for example, the Midrash says, "Geshenigla Kadosh Baruch Hu litain Torah liYisrael, lo al Yisrael bovad hu nigla, ela al kol ha'umot." When Hashem gave the Torah, He didn't just ask Am Yisrael, He asked all of the nations of the world. Tchila halach etzel b'nei Esav. First, He went to Esav and Amar lehem, and He asked them, "Mekablim etem et Torah? Will you receive the Torah?" Amru lo. Esav said to them, "Ma katuv ba? What's in it?" Amar lahem, he answered, "Lo tirtzach, you should not murder." Amru, no, we can't accept that, because the whole foundation of our tribe, of our nation, is built on Esav, they said. And Esav was a rotzeach. So holach etzel b'nei Ammon u'Moab. So he went to Ammon and Moab, and Amru lo, he said to them, "Mekablim etem et Torah? Will you receive the Torah?" So Amru lo, they said to him, "Ma katuv bo? What's in it?" They said, "Lo tinaf." Where is Ammon and Moab from? From incestuous relationship with Lot and his daughters. So we can't accept that. We can't accept this Torah. So they went to Yishmael. Amar le, "Mekablim etem et Torah? Ma katuv bo? What's in it?" He said, "Lo tignov." He says, "No, we can't accept that, because Yishmael, our founder, was known for his marauding ways." And each and every nation, Hashem went to the nation and they answered, "Ma katuv bo," what's written in it? And they rejected it until He came to Am Yisrael. And what was the answer of Am Yisrael? What was the answer that we gave? Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do it, and then we'll understand it. And we know that Chazal talk about, they praise Am Yisrael for this answer of Na'aseh v'nishma. And they say it's the secret of the Malachim, it's the secret of the angels to say Na'aseh v'nishma. And the question is, what is this Midrash teaching us as a difference between the Umot HaOlam, the attitude of the nations of the world to Torah, and the attitude of the Jewish people to Torah? And what is it, Na'aseh v'nishma, that's a secret of the angels? What I'd like to suggest, that this really is a fundamental distinction, which doesn't just touch on a secret about Torah, but really about a secret about life. That if one understands the core meaning of this Midrash, their life is on a pathway to meaning, purpose, and happiness. And if one doesn't understand the lesson of this Midrash, their life is on a pathway to tremendous disappointment. So what is it that the Midrash is holding? What is the secret of the angels? And to explain it, allow me to suggest a fundamental distinction between two kinds of decisions, two kinds of mindsets that I think we find in the writings of Rabbi Sacks, what I would call the consumer and the covenant. The first is the consumer. A consumer mindset has four elements. Number one, knowledge precedes commitment. If you were going to buy something, what are the type of questions you would ask before you purchase something? What would you ask? The price. You want to know the cost. How much is it going to cost? What else? What does it do? What's the utility? What else? How long will it last? Okay, you want to get the most amount of knowledge that you can have before you would make that commitment to purchase it. In fact, at YU, Yeshiva University, our business school is called the Cy Sims School of Business. Now, how many people here know who Cy Sims was? Okay. Okay, everybody online, I want you to, we're going to go back, you'll hear that. Okay, Cy Sims was a trustee of Yeshiva University, donated to name the business school. He was, he had this great company that sells suits, and he did his own commercials. He didn't hire an actor, he did his own commercials. And anyone who's a certain generation, certainly nobody here who is currently a student of Grus would know this, but anyone who's a certain generation knows his commercial. It's really amazing because as the president of YU, people pitch me marketing ideas all the time. And I wouldn't have thought that this one would be one that you remember. But 40 years from that commercial, everyone remembers this commercial. And he said, an educated consumer is our best customer. And that's what is your best consumer, meaning he wanted to say that the more you know, the more you'd want to buy his product. That is the ideal. If you are buying something, you want to know as much. Knowledge precedes commitment. That's the first element of a consumer. The second is you want to limit risk. You want to ask about the warranty. You want to ask about the return policy. When it comes to buying products, you don't really want great leaps of faith, right? You prefer to have clarity about how you can get out. That's two. Number three, you as a consumer do not change because of the transaction, right? What you're asking, is it good for me to buy this product? The me, the I still exists, always exists as separate from the product. I don't change. It doesn't change me. It's a purchase. It's not who I am. It's an acquisition that's something external. It doesn't define you. It's not who you are. And number four, the object is an object. You know, in the words of Buber, you have an I-it relationship with an object that you purchase. It's not an I-thou relationship, of course. Those are all consumer aspects. Knowledge precedes commitment. You want to limit risk. These are not leaps of faith. The transaction doesn't change you. You have an I-it relationship. Now, when it comes to the covenantal mindset, it's just the opposite. Here, interestingly enough, commitment precedes knowledge. In fact, the essence of the relationship is the unknown future. A great example of this is marriage. Marriage is an example where commitment precedes knowledge. Now, does one really know fully their spouse before they're married? You date, you know there's compatibility, mutual attraction, but you actually don't really know until afterwards. What's interesting is you can't know until afterwards because commitment needs to precede the knowledge. For life, relationships, real intimacy is when one is willing to make themselves vulnerable to the other, to reveal aspects of themselves that they otherwise wouldn't show. And they're only willing to do that if there's a belief that you're on the same team and that you're there together in the long term. Moreover, life evolves. We don't know what's going to happen. You get married, you don't know what's going to change in your life, what circumstances you're going to face, how each of you will evolve. Who could have guessed that something like COVID would happen and how we react and deal with situations in COVID? Right? You can't know. There's an unknowability when you get married. The other person doesn't even know themselves. And it's a constant evolution and revelation of one to the other. But it only comes and it starts with commitment. And what's amazing is that's what's joyous and exciting about marriage. You know, C.S. Lewis wrote this book when his wife passed away on grief observed. And he spoke about what he loves so much about his wife is her alterity. It's what he did not know, that she kept on revealing. He felt the process was a process of discovery. And what was exciting about his marriage was the mystery. You know, that's what life is. That's what marriage is. And it takes time, and it takes work, and it comes to, and there's tension, and there's challenge that happens. There's disruption in life. And that is further opportunity for more growth and more revelation and people to get to know one another in a deeper way. But you need the commitment first before you get to the knowledge. That's the first thing. Second, it's all about faith and risk. Getting married is a risk. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks wrote, to enter into a covenant, like deciding to marry or have a child, is to take a risk. It's an act of faith in an unknown and unknowable future. It's by definition. Number three, the change of marriage is holistic. It's defining. It defines your whole person. You're not just married for a couple of hours when you get home, but you're not married when you're at work. You're not just married for this week, but next week you're not married, and the following week you are. When you get married, it changes everything about you. And finally, the relationship is not I, it. It is fundamentally I, thou. It is the empathy, it is the love that you have for one another as you see each other. And you're a whole person when you're together. It is the premier example of an I-thou relationship. There are two mindsets, the consumer mindset and the covenantal mindset. Now, both are appropriate in the right settings, right? When you go to a supermarket, you should have a consumer mindset. When you go home and you're with your spouse, you should have a covenantal mindset. The problem is when these get confused. And this is a theme that Rabbi Sacks turned to in his writings over and over again. What happens when you live in such a consumer society like ours? How does that affect you? So, for example, Rabbi Sacks once said, the consumer society was laid down by the late Steve Jobs, coming down the mountains with two tablets, the iPad 1 and the iPad 2. And the result is that we now have a culture of iPod, iPhone, iTunes, I. When you're an individualistic, egocentric culture and you only care about I, you don't do terribly well. What does a consumer ethic do? It makes you aware of all the time of the things you don't have, instead of thanking God for all the things you do have. Or when he wrote, a consumer-driven, advertising-dominated culture militates daily against ongoing attachments. It's constantly inviting us to switch to a different brand, to try something new, go for a better deal elsewhere. It should not come as a surprise that this begins to affect human relationships as well. A society saturated by market values would be one in which relationships were temporary, loyalties provisional, and commitments easily discarded. It would, in short, be one in which marriage made little sense, and that, by and large, is what has happened. And what has happened when a covenantal relationship turns into a consumer? It's a total deterioration of, for example, areas like dating and marriage. You know, I used to be the rabbi of the Jewish Center in Manhattan on the Upper West Side. And on the Upper West Side, there was, thousands of singles. And one of the questions that, always rose is how do we help, set up shidduchim and people to match one another? And it was a deep analysis of what are the challenges of that. So one of the challenges was that people confuse the covenantal with the consumer. Like there's always this concept like over-the-shoulder syndrome. That when you're facing one person, you're looking over the shoulder and saying, well, maybe there's something better. There's a better product on the shelf. Or these narrow definitions, these checklists of external matters to see if the person makes all the checklists. It's this attempt to try to get all of the knowledge before you have the commitment. And what's more, it's not just the challenge of getting married, but when you are married then, if you think of it as a consumer, what's going to happen is that when there's disruption, because there's always disruption, you're going to be thinking quickly about the return policy. I mean, one of the reasons there's such a high rate of divorce is because there's a high rate of divorce. So if you're going into the relationship with one foot out the door already, when you get to disruption, you'll be out the door. It has to start with you have to be 2 feet in. You have to be totally committed. Then you work through those disruptions. Then you're able to get to greater knowledge afterwards. The key is the commitment beforehand. In halacha, these two models, fascinatingly, are brought together in one specific area out of curiosity, because we're dealing with our kolel. Anybody can think what Gemara, and all of Shas that you know, what Gemara brings these two relationships, the covenantal and the consumer, together clearly, I think, in stark relief of one another. This is a tough one. You have thousands of people watching. What Gemara? So what is the makor of Kedushin? Kicha kicha mistei Ephron. The Gemara talks about, the Mishnah in Kedushin says, Isha nikneit b'shlosha drachim. And the Gemara says one of them is kesef shtar and bia. And how do we know that the concept of kinyan applies when it comes to marriage? So the Gemara answers, we learn it from Gzeira Shava of kicha kicha mistei Ephron. That there's another time it says ki yikach ish isha when it comes to marriage, and there's another time that word is used, and that's when it comes to Avram acquiring the field of Marat HaMachpelah from Ephron. Now here you have clearly these two mindsets, these two relationships, the consumer and the covenantal. And what it does is, while it's bringing them together, you can learn one from the other in terms of some aspects of the Maisa. In fact, it puts them in stark relief of each other. As immediately the Gemara says, that it's not just called kinyan, it's also kiddushin. The first Mishnah, the second parak, is a ish mekadesh. Because really to capture the relationship of marriage, it can't be captured by the word kinyan, because it's about sanctity. It's about holiness. It's about transcendence. There's something so much more. So by putting it right in connection from one another, it highlights in stark relief the differences of each other. That's these two relationships. There are two. We have to keep them, we have to know them, approach each one correctly, and make sure that when you approach them, you're doing each one the right way. The problem is when we approach products like a covenant, and we define ourselves by what we buy and what we purchase, when that becomes too definitional to us, on the one hand, or when we approach covenantal relationships with the I and keep it separate and treat it like a product, as an I it, as opposed to an I thou. As Rabbi Sacks said, when we allow market forces, consumerism, to guide and design our lives, we'll be left with a society of I. It is only through covenant that we can become a we. Now, this is the backdrop to understanding this midrash when Chazal speaks about Matan Torah, about giving the Torah. That they contrast this attitude that the midrash ascribes to the nations of the world versus the attitude of Am Yisrael. What is the difference between what you see in the midrash and the see by Am Yisrael? What would you say is the difference? Consumer versus covenant. Meaning when you go to the Umot HaOlam and Hashem says, Makablim etem et Torah, will you receive the Torah? What do they answer? Ma katuv bo. What's in it? I need to see what's in it first. But when Am Yisrael, when Hashem came to Am Yisrael, they said, Naaseh v'nishma. This is not a quantitative difference. It's qualitatively approaching Torah in a fundamentally different way. Do you approach it as a consumer? You go through the checklist, you see what fits me, if I like it or not. There's an I that is separate from it. I judge it. I decide it. Does it have utility for me? or if you approach it as a covenant, where commitment precedes knowledge. It's fascinating that in Chazal, they speak of Har Sinai as a chuppah. And the Midrash Har Sinai was placed over Am Yisrael as a chuppah. And Chazal tell us, Torah tziva lanu Moshe morasha kilat Yaakov, al tikri morasha ella mu'urasa. When we speak about Torah as a heritage, don't just speak of it as morasha, but also as mu'urasa, as a betrothed, as a beloved. The Torah relationship, the relationship with Torah, is seen as a covenant, is seen as a wedding. It's a fundamentally different approach towards Torah, towards Hashem, than it is as a consumer. And it's only because we're willing to commit so much and to commit in advance that we gain so much. There's a fascinating Gemara that a heretic came to Rava, and he saw Rava sitting in the Beit Midrash, and Rava was like all contorted, like in this tortured way, and he was stepping on his fingers, and like blood was coming out of his fingers. And the heretic looks at him, and he sees that he's contorting himself in all these ways to try to figure out and understand Torah. And he says, what are you doing? You're making the same mistake that you made when you first agreed, when your people first agreed. You said na'aseh before nishma. You're toiling before you even understand it. If this is what it's doing to you, don't do it. And Rava said, no. This is what it means to accept, to have a commitment beforehand. It means sometimes you have to struggle. It means sometimes you have to be challenged. A life of Torah isn't always so simple. But it's only by being committed and working through it and struggling that it reveals its secrets to you throughout your life. It's true in so many ways. It's true when you study. It's true when you learn. I came to Yeshiva University, my first speech to the Beit Midrash, I spoke about how important it is to have night seder. That it's not enough that we learn in the morning, of course, and we learn in the time you're supposed to learn. And then afterwards, you go to the academics. But at night, you come back to night seder, and you don't just learn into the night. You learn deep into the night. Because the Keter Shel Torah, the crown of Torah, comes in the darkness of the night. When you stretch yourself, when you push yourself beyond the limits that you thought you were capable of, that's when the Torah reveals its secrets to you. I know I could speak personally myself, that's when I felt the Yad Hashem, I felt closest to Hashem, was 1, 2 o'clock in the morning here in the Grus Beit Midrash in Yerushalayim, when you were pushing yourself, right? And it's true wherever you are, whatever life circumstance you're in, when you push yourself and you challenge yourself. Or more broadly, when you go through challenging times, when you go through difficult times, and you turn to the Torah for solace and support. It comforts you. It's there for you. Hashem reveals himself to you. That's what it means when you have commitment, when you have commitment at the heart. The Naseh v'nishma, the commitment precedes knowledge. It's the key to everything. When it comes to Torah, it's not a product. It creates results. It's not something you own, but something you cherish. It's not tangential to your life, it's essential to your life. And it's not a transaction. It's a transformation. There is no I. You become transformed. The I turns into a we, both in your relationship with Torah and Hashem, your relationship with the rest of the Jewish people, our responsibility to the world, our connection to the expanse of history. When I speak about Yeshiva University, I've had this many, many times, where I'm speaking in an audience, both of Jews and non-Jews, and I get people asking me questions. They say, Rabbi, when you speak about Yeshiva University, you talk about like it's a 3,000-year-old institution. How could it be a 3,000-year-old institution? How old are you guys? I said, we're 3,000 years old because we date our beginning at Moses at Sinai. That is the beginning. That is the truth that was revealed to us and was passed down from generation to generation. That's the beginning of Yeshiva University. And you know when it ends? It ends when we get to Tzion. It ends when we get to Geula. In the words of Martin Luther King, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. We begin at Sinai, at truth, and we end at justice for all. And what we do is we teach the leaders of tomorrow to bend that arc and bring it towards justice. That's part of seeing yourself as part of the covenantal community. It's not about I. You don't start your life when you were born, and it doesn't end when you pass away. It has begun, it's your parents, it's your grandparents, generations to generations, dating back thousands of years, and it continues, Bezrat Hashem, long after you have gone. That's what it means to be part of the covenantal community. And the covenantal community, what it also does, it transforms you. And it transforms each part of you. You know, there's fascinating Gemara that talks about the Amor Rav Yosef. The Rav Yosef said that on the holiday of Shavuot, the holiday of Matan Torah, I have a big celebration. Because if it wasn't for this day, Kama Yosei Ika Bashuka. How many Yosis would be in the marketplace? What do you think he means? How many Yosis would be in the marketplace? If not for Matan Torah. What do you think?
Be a regular guy.
So one approach is to be a regular guy. It's the Torah that gives us our distinction. And I can tell you, I have found this over and over again. Right? The Torah distinguishes us. And people who know that and see that, respect that. The world respects that the Torah and the Torah values distinguish you. We want to talk about Rabbi Sacks and what he represented, not just to the Jewish people, but to the world. Right? The Torah as a distinguishing mark in his incredible articulation of our values and what we stand for. That's what made Rabbi Sacks. That's what made Rav Yosef. If it wasn't for the Torah, I'd be like any other Yossi in the marketplace. That's one interpretation. Another that I've heard is the Torah unifies different parts of ourselves. Meaning, we all have different parts of our lives. Okay, we go to work, we're home, recreationally, we play basketball, we're in the, you have chavruta, you're in the Beit Midrash. What is it that unifies who you are? Kama Yosei Ika Bishuka. What unifies Yosef, Rav Yosef? What unifies Rav Yosef is the Torah. If it wasn't for the Torah, then we'd have all different assets. We'd be bifurcated and trifurcated. But it's seeing every part of you as part of your avodas Hashem, your service to God, that unifies who you are. You know, I remember a couple of years ago, a father of one of our graduates came to me and said, listen, my son has a problem. He graduated Yeshiva University, and when he was in YU, he was, learning many Siddharim, and he, had a long tefillah. And then he got this great job in this unbelievable firm, a very sought-after position. And now he's working all these hours. He doesn't have time for his long Siddharim. He doesn't have time for as long of a tefillah. So where's his avodas Hashem? Where's his service to God? So I said to him, what we teach at Yeshiva University is in addition to the learning and the davening, it's his work in the firm, which is his avodas Hashem. Because by the way he acts, with menschlichkeit, with compassion, with integrity and kindness, the way that he interrelates to everybody in the workplace is an opportunity to sanctify Hashem's name, to mekadesh Shem Shemayim berab. Every moment of his day is an opportunity to sanctify Hashem's name. And in addition to the value of whatever position, whatever work he's doing, in addition to the parnasa of supporting his family, in addition to the amount of money he's then able to give to tzedakah, in addition to that, every moment, if you think of your life as part of a greater mission of getting to geula, of redemption, then every moment is part of this great journey. That by sanctifying Hashem's name in the public square, you're helping bring geula, you're helping bend that arc. You're helping the Jewish story move forward. Without the Torah, Kama Yosi Ika Bishuka, we'd all have different bifurcated parts. It's with the Torah and the mission of the Torah that unifies what we're doing, all in the service of Hashem. That is the covenant. That is viewing yourself, your relationship with Torah, your relationship with others, your relationship with history in covenantal terms. To not think and go through life as a consumer, but go through life with the prism, with the eyes of the covenant. You know, I mentioned before that COVID has caused an enormous disruption. A lot of people are asking these kinds of questions. What do I want to do? Who am I? You know, my whole life has been upended. There's been a disruption. I can choose differently. What are my priorities? Where do I want to situate myself? And my suggestion when these questions arise is to think of yourself not as a consumer, but think of your own life as a covenant. Choose for yourself the path that leads to more meaning and purpose, that focuses on the we more than the I, that places you as part of the past and the future of the covenantal community. Make your decisions around that framework. That will ensure happiness, meaning, and purpose. And when we speak about educating the leaders of tomorrow, it is central that you walk through your life with this focus, that this is your prism, and that if we could raise a younger generation and future generations to view their lives as in covenantal terms, then we'll be assured that we have a promising future ahead. With all of the disruption that has happened, we are still living in an enormous time of opportunity. And this is something Rabbi Sacks turns to time and time again, which is the opportunity of today. The Jewish people, the state of Israel, with Torah and communications, able to spread our messages all around the world, being in positions of enormous influence, as an opportunity of spreading our values, a message of bringing the geula, perhaps like never before in history. We need to see ourselves in covenantal terms, and then we will be able to fulfill the terms of the covenant, and we will get to our final destination. During these times, it's the thought of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks that so much serves for us as a guide. As he was a blessing to all of us, may his memory be blessed. Yehei Zichro Baruch. Thank you.